It's unprecedented. It truly is terrifying, Mike, when you put this in context. And when you talk about besides, you just heard Will Ripley talking about it as slightly smaller than the Hiroshima bomb. Obviously, this is something that could kill, I mean, you know, what are you talking about now? Depending on what sort of metro area you hit, millions of people.
Yeah, obviously, this is very, very concerning for a couple of things. They've ramped up their testing. Their first test was in 2006, then 2009, 2012, multiple tests now in 2016. And there's three components you worry about on this, Aaron. That weaponization part that Barbara Starr talked about, that's the hardest part. Missiles, we've seen them fire missiles from a submarine. We've seen them test fire Scud missiles in rapid fire to try to counter air defense systems. Places like Japan recently, all this is recently, and now they're saying they have this standardized, weaponized nuclear tip on these missiles. I'm a little skeptical that they've gotten that far on that, but I'll tell you, this is they're playing a very dangerous game as they move forward with all of these tests. It's about 2/3 of the size of the bomb we dropped in Hiroshima. That is big, and it's dangerous.
I mean, and Barbara, you mentioned here, looking at the map, you know, you say they could hit, obviously, elsewhere in Asia, but also the United States. This has been their goal. This is something some in the U.S. military are deeply, deeply afraid of when you look at that they could strike Pacific Northwest, Hawaii, Alaska, down into California is the goal. Does the U.S. even know? Do we even know what they have or where they are?
Well, when you look at that map, that's just a stunning part of the globe that they could hold really at risk with their nuclear weapons. I agree with Mike. I think it remains to be seen how much of this arsenal right now really could work. But if they are on the path and they are having a successful test program, they're going to get there eventually, and sooner rather than later maybe. And that's why you saw President Obama today remind the world that he says he won't allow them to become a nuclear state, a nuclear power. And he talked about the full U.S. capability to protect our allies in the region. And what he's really talking about is reminding Kim Jong-un the U.S. too has nuclear weapons.
Which, of course, though, using them is something we say we never even consider doing. Juliet, though, Donald Trump today comes and says, look, this is the fourth test North Korea has performed since Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State. Now, granted, 3 of those tests were after she was Secretary of State, but he is saying her leadership or lack thereof is part of what caused this. Why can you put someone in the White House? Why should we put someone in the White House who was unable to stop what could be a great existential threat to our nation?
Well, there's no question it's an existential threat, and there's also no question that nuclear testing was in the previous administration. So let's just get the calendar straight right now. I also think it's worth noting, right, at least, that there's only one solution to this problem, and it's called China. That is it. Unless you're going to commit us to
using nuclear weapons,
using nuclear weapons, right? And so,
right,
exactly. Unless you're going to commit, the solution is China, because the only reason why the North Korean regime actually can survive, because everyone's starving, it has no economy, is because of the influence and investments by the Chinese. Now, so why do we have this concerted effort of outrage? It's not just because people are only talking. It is to convince the Chinese that there are going to be penalties to China, and particularly in Asia, if they don't start to focus on either changing this regime or stopping this regime. Now, this is not like, oh, if only I had been president, Donald Trump, everything would be fine. This is a problem China has had, Japan has had, South Korea has had, and there's only one solution.
All right, but Mike Rogers, this is something Donald Trump does say. He says he's going to take on China. Easier said than done, though. I mean, if it were that easy to just go in and say, hey, China, do it or else, President Obama would have done that if it were that easy. It is not that easy.
Well, here's the challenge for the next president. So there's probably several steps that they're going to have to take. I think this administration needs to show that it's serious in the sense that there's also this military option that's short of nuclear weapons. I don't believe the president really actually meant he was using nuclear weapons. I think he meant that we have kinetic strike capability that would far exceed the North Koreans' ability to stop it, meaning they could target their nuclear weapon program. I think, Mike Rogers thinks that's what he was trying to say. And that's actually the right statement to say toward the North Koreans. That is a bit of a deterrent. We're also going to have to bring joint exercises closer to the Korean Peninsula with Japan and other allies in the region that are at risk, including South Korea, that are at risk from these nuclear or missiles. The other part of this, by the way, on China, just the China, we can get to the public on top of the table trading issues. I think those are easier to get to. What China will and has not done is stop the black market trading on the north border. That's how they're surviving. The black market economy is huge. China doesn't want to touch it because they're in some economic tough times as well. That